So let's take a look at iOS and Xcode. So first we want to look at the pod file. Okay, pod file is what pulls in our dependencies. And so this is a little simpler than the Android version. Oh, it's just wrapping. Okay. One thing Xcode does, and I don't really like it. If your font size is too big, it starts wrapping lines around rather than making you scroll horizontally, and it makes presentations really weird. But okay, you'll see in a minute. You specify your target platform, tell which project you're referencing, and then here's where we start pulling in ADAL for iOS, and then the Microsoft Graph SDK for iOS. So these are the two, well, one is a library, one is the framework that we're going to pull in, although it doesn't differentiate between those two things here. The next thing is we have a storyboard. Storyboard's pretty cool, I think. I can get it to load. And what I have to do is I have to pinch zoom here. So storyboard essentially says, in this case, this is the way the user flow is going to be in our application. We're going to start off, this navigation controller is going to load. That's just something we get by default. It will then load this authentication screen. Okay, once the authentication screen loads, we will then load up this calendar list page. And in here, we've defined essentially a list view, and we define something called a prototype. And so you can use the UI tools to define what you want your layout to look like, and then we can use this prototype as we pull in data. It'll start generating it based on this prototype that we've created here. So let's take a look at some of the controller, or the controller data. This one here, it's like the calendar, I don't know what that's doing. Calendar table view controller, so this is where it's going to pull in that calendar data. And so we're going to see, we have a method here called getEvents, and we have fun C, stars and asterisks and stuff like that. But really what we're doing is we're creating a null array here called events list. We do some UI stuff with the spinny thing, and then we come down here and we start, I'll show you where I actually make the call. We have this MS Graph Service Event Collection Fetcher. Great name. That's part of the SDK, the framework. And what we're going to do is we're going to get an instance of the Graph client. We're going to get the me instance of the Graph client, which is the Graph client for the current user. And then we're going to get their events. Okay? We're going to add some, we're not adding any filters, that's why it's nil. And then what we're doing is we're selecting just 3 fields. So we only want the Graph service to return the subject, the start date and end date. And then it just calls read with callback. And then loops through each one, does this dispatch stuff. Once it loops through each one, it adds it to the events list, and then it stops the animation and loads that table of data. I didn't show login, but the login is pretty, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Well, that will make it bigger though. Maybe I did want to do that. It's not much better. Okay. So this is our authentication manager. Now, just like Android and Windows, we have to get our resource ID. We have to get a URL that we're going to send back to the service. And then we create an instance of our authentication manager and call this method acquire auth token with resource ID. pass in some data. In the end, it's going to return something down here. What it's going to do is actually call this calendar table view controller and load it up. Okay. And what I want to do is just run this. I think I have to close this one. We'll run this on the emulator. I'll come up here in just a minute. Oh, it doesn't like this resolution. This could be interesting. Maybe I can zoom in. Okay, well, we're just going to scroll. It'll be nice and big. You guys can see it, right? So, first thing we're doing is we're going to log in. Again, all this is doing is loading that web view. And hopefully, oh, okay. It would have loaded the web view, but I've already done this once. I can go back and clear all my cookies. In this case, we actually did implement it here. Here. So that cleared the cache. So now I should have to authenticate again. Okay. So I'm going to log in with KDJ. Everybody close your eyes. Oops. You didn't see that, did you? I don't care. Okay, so this one needs permission to read your calendars, sign in as you, and read your user profile twice. For some reason. I actually know the reason. It's because there's two different places you can specify that, one in the graph permissions and one in the Azure Active Directory permissions. And when I went in there, I think I forgot to remove it out of the Azure Active Directory permissions. Click accept. Our spinner loads, so it's trying to load our calendar events. Okay, good. It's just a little slow. So now it's loading those events, and it used that template to create these repeated items in my list of calendar events. So that is iOS. Don't need that anymore. Let's go back to slides. Okay, so that's all great, but how many of you want to target just a specific platform? Not many, right? I mean, most companies these days, they need an iOS application and they need an Android application, and Microsoft would love them to need a Windows Phone application too, right? May not happen, that's okay. But let's talk about some techniques you guys can use to build a cross-platform application that can run across all three, just in case you need the Windows version 2. Now you may really need one if you're running, like designing a tablet application. You want it to run on Windows tablet, iOS tablet, Android tablet, okay? So the first option, Apache Cordova. This is a great option if you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript developers in your organization, or you are one yourself. Essentially what this allows you to do is create an HTML-based application, web pages, CSS, JavaScript. You can call out to external services with your JavaScript, but it patches it all up and deploys everything locally to the device so that it can run just like a native application on the device. Okay, it's all open source, which means it's free, which is really nice. There's some great APIs that come with Cordova out of the box, and then there's a whole bunch of community-driven or community-contributed extensions to the Cordova application. If you've ever heard of PhoneGap or App Builder or Ionic, all of these platforms build on top of Apache Cordova. So what do you use to build it? Well, you can use Visual Studio 2013 or above, as long as you have update 4. You install something called Visual Studio Tools for Apache Cordova. In Visual Studio 2015, it's just one of the options to install. You can install these just as part of the Visual Studio installer. The nice thing about this technique is we can go back and we can use the Add Connected Service Wizard just like we could when building a Windows application. So that makes your life a little bit easier as a developer. You don't have to manually go into to Windows Azure, Active Directory, and create your application instance and try and figure out what that redirect URI needs to be. It does it all for you. When would you use this? Well, if you need to build a multi-tenant application or a multi-device application. If you have existing developers who are skilled with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that would be a great reason to take a serious look at using Apache Cordova. And if licensing is really expensive, we'll talk about the next option in a second where there are licensing costs. But it's hard to beat open source sometimes. And so this can be a great option for you. So what does this look like? Essentially, your Office 365 assets are kind of installed under this directory, services/Office 365. That contains your libraries. You have a settings.js file, which defines your client ID, your app redirect, but that Add Connected Services Wizard sets that all up for you. There's a O365 loader JavaScript file that dynamically loads the SDK references to your pages, so you don't have to manually add those in. You just reference the loader, and it does it for you. And then the way you debug it is an in-browser emulator called Ripple. It emulates a Nexus device that will do an Android, and then to debug an iOS application, well, you have to actually have a Mac. You can remotely debug from a Windows machine to a Mac and do your debugging that way. And if you have an iOS device, like a phone or a tablet, connected to your Mac, you can actually kind of double hop and go into debug through the physical device as well. Like I said, there's a bunch of plugins that'll help with rich integration if you have some specific functionality you're looking for. Look at all those plugins because they may already exist to do what you want them to do. And then you can get some additional packages. You can use NuGet if you want to pull in Bootstrap or Angular or another, let's say you want to use Ember.js or some other JavaScript framework, you can do that. And then again, in the end, it just renders HTML. So whatever you can do with HTML, look and feel, you can do it in an Apache Cordova app. Run out of time. I don't have time for a demo because there's some cool slides I want to get to at the end. The next option is Xamarin. So this is again a cross-platform.
As a matter of fact, that's why I'm here.
For Xamarin?
The demo you're just skipping.
Oh no!
May this be the case for some more people in the room? Is it or is it not?
Well.
Just ask. Go ahead and ask the audience.
Well, let me get through this other stuff. So another reason is my demo isn't working. So that's the second reason. I am running out of time, but my demo isn't working.
Okay.
I would have really tried to fit it in.
Okay.
So Xamarin is. Oh, by the way, though, if you do want to see the demo, there's a recording of this session online. You can get to it from the Cloud Roadshow website. Just click on this session; it'll send you to a recording, and I think they show a demo on there. If not, I'll give you my email address, and I can get you some more information. Okay, Xamarin. Xamarin is an ISV that actually Microsoft just announced we're acquiring last week, I think. Which is cool, because what you do is you build your code in C#, and you can deploy that code through the Xamarin compilation process to Android and to iOS. So it gives you a way to take that code and to share it across